You're watching Noir Street. I'm your host, Nero Wolfe. Every story hides a secret, and every shadow hides a clue. Tell us where in the world you're watching from. Subscribe, tap the like button, and join us as we drift into mystery. Chapter 1. The Blank Page. The blue ribbon arrived before the corpse. That was not literally true. Jonathan Hale had been dead for nearly 9 hours when Arthur Bell brought the ribbon to West 35th Street. But from our point of view, the ribbon came first. Since Bell laid it on Wolfe's desk before mentioning that its owner had been found with a broken skull beside a locked office desk, Wolfe looked at the ribbon. I looked at Bell. Bell looked as if he had slept in a chair, shaved in a moving cab, and spent the morning arguing with people who considered money a substitute for sense. He was tall, lean, and dark-haired, with a steady grey eye and an overcoat that had collected the damp November air of New York. I had met him once before, during a warehouse matter in Brooklyn, and remembered that he asked direct questions, listened to answers, and did not announce conclusions merely to hear his own voice. Those qualities put him ahead of several public officials we knew. He had arrived at 11:20, which was 20 minutes after Wolfe came down from the plant rooms, and 30 minutes before lunch. That placed him in a narrow interval during which Wolfe sometimes tolerated murder if it was described efficiently. Bell had not begun efficiently. He had placed a narrow blue ribbon on Wolfe's desk and said, "What does that tell you?" Wolfe's brows moved a fraction. "That you have brought me a ribbon." Bell glanced at me. I said. He warmed slowly. Wolfe was behind his desk in a brown suit, yellow shirt, and a tie patterned with small dark shapes that might have been flowers or warnings. The office was warm. A fire burned behind the brass screen, and the morning light lay across the bookshelves without improving them. On the corner of Wolfe's desk stood a vase containing 3 sprays of pale orchids he had brought down because one bloom pleased him, and the others required discipline. Bell touched the ribbon with one finger. It marked a blank page in an account book. "Then it marked nothing," Wolfe said. "That is what the family says. Families frequently improve facts by agreement. The man who owned the account book is dead." Wolfe sighed. There are sighs that indicate sorrow, fatigue, or impatience. Wolfe's indicated that Bell had knowingly placed a homicide between him and Fritz's preparation of shad roe. "Name?" He asked. "Jonathan Hale." That name I knew. Hale Brothers Importing had been moving silk, tea, carved wood, spices, porcelain, and expensive misunderstandings through New York Harbor for 40 years. The newspapers described Jonathan Hale as a merchant prince, which meant he was rich, disliked, and photographed at charity dinners. "Age?" Wolfe asked. 62. "Cause of death?" "Blow to the back of the skull." "Weapon?" "A bronze paperweight shaped like a ship." "Found?" "On the carpet beside him." "Fingerprints?" "His own, his nephew's, and several partial smears." "Location?" "Grayford House, East 68th Street." "Hale's residence." "Time?" "The medical examiner places death between 10 and 11 last night." "Who found him?" "His sister, Ruth Hale, at 11:20. "Why were you called?" Bell removed his overcoat and draped it over the back of a chair. He had not been invited to sit, but he did so anyway, choosing the red leather chair usually occupied by Inspector Kramer. That was either courage or ignorance. "Jonathan Hale retained me 3 weeks ago," Bell said. "He believed someone was stealing from his private accounts." "How much?" "He would not say." "From which accounts?" "He would not say." "Whom did he suspect?" "He would not say." Wolfe's lips pressed together. "You accepted employment from a man who refused to describe the problem. He paid in advance. That explains acceptance, not usefulness. He promised details when he had proof. Yesterday afternoon he telephoned and asked me to come to Grayford House at 10:30. He said he had found the entry that mattered." "The entry in the account book?" "I assume so." "You did not arrive." "I arrived at 10:28. The front door was locked." The bell received no answer. "Servants?" The housekeeper and cook had been given the evening off. Hale's valet had gone to visit a sick brother in Newark. Hale arranged to be alone, yet his family was present. His sister Ruth lives in the house. She attended a concert and returned shortly after 11. His nephew Owen has rooms on the 3rd floor but says he spent the evening at his club. Others. Hale's private clerk, Simon Trent, occupies a small apartment above the rear offices. He says he was there working on account records until 10:45. Was she in the house? The office wing is connected to the residence by an interior passage. Wolf's eyes narrowed. Then, Mr. Hale was not alone. Not completely. Continue. Bell leaned forward. I walked around the house. The side gate was locked. The rear courtyard was empty. Hale's office window faced the courtyard and showed light. The curtains were partly open, but I could not see the desk from ground level. I returned to the front and rang again. At 10:40, I telephoned the house from a drugstore. No answer. Since Hale had insisted on the appointment, I remained nearby. How nearby? I asked. In a hired car across the street. You saw who entered? No one entered through the front door between 10:40 and 11:15. Rear entrance? Not visible from the street, Wolf said. At 11:15. Ruth Hale's cab arrived. She entered with her own key. 4 minutes later, she opened the front door and called for help. I crossed the street. What did you find? Hale was lying behind his desk. The bronze ship was beside his right hand. The account book lay open on the desk, tied around the spine with this ribbon. The ribbon marked a blank page, locked room. The office door was locked. From which side? Inside. Key? In the lock. Windows. One window closed and latched from inside. Chimney? Fireplace blocked by an iron grate too narrow for passage. Other openings. A document cupboard built into the wall, but no second door or service hatch. We checked. We? Inspector Rowan arrived before midnight. I raised my brows. Kramer gave you the ribbon? No. Bell's hand remained on the arm of the chair. I took it before he arrived. Wolf closed his eyes. I said, "That is a friendly way to describe removing evidence." Left the account book. You improved the scene selectively. I had been hired by Hale. I believed the ribbon might be what he intended to show me. Wolf opened his eyes. You stole an object from a murder scene because it interested you? Yes. Why bring it here? Because it now interests me too much. That was a better answer than most men would have given. Wolf looked at the ribbon. It was ordinary silk, perhaps 10 inches long, dark blue and slightly frayed at one end. A faint crease crossed it near the middle. Was it tied? Wolf asked. A single loose knot around the book's spine. One end lay between pages 62 and 63. The blank page was numbered? 63. Were the surrounding pages used? Yes, page 62 contained household payments from 6 years ago. Page 64 began a list of charitable subscriptions. Different subjects. Yes, same handwriting. Jonathan Hale's. Was page 63 blank on both sides? The front was blank. The reverse contained 3 entries. Wolf's fingers stopped moving. Bell noticed. The ribbon marked the front side, he added. At least the end rested against it. Describe the account book. Brown leather. About 9 inches high. Thick paper. Entries covering 15 years. Private or business? Mixed. Household expenses, personal loans, gifts, travel costs, small investments, payments to servants, donations. Was it kept in the office? Ruth says Jonathan stored it in the locked center drawer of his desk. Was the drawer open? Yes. Lock forced? No. Key? On Hale's watch chain, I said. So either he opened the drawer himself, or the killer knew how to borrow. A key from a dead man, Bell nodded. Wolf regarded him. You said the family considers the ribbon meaningless. Owen Hale said his uncle used ribbons wherever they happened to fall. Ruth said the marked page concerned old household expenses and had no relation to the murder. But the page was blank. She meant the surrounding pages. That is not what she said? No. Her exact words were, Jonathan had been reviewing old household expenses. The ribbon means nothing. Wolf leaned back. What did Mr. Trent say? That she had never seen the ribbon before. And the account book? He knew it existed, but claimed no knowledge of the entries surrounding the blank page. Who else was in the house? Besides Ruth, Owen, and Simon Trent, there is Graham Pike, Hale's business partner. He arrived at 10:55, according to Ruth. Why? He says Jonathan telephoned him at 9:30 and demanded he come immediately. Did he enter? He used a side entrance and claims he found it locked. Then how was he inside when Ruth returned? Bell paused. He was not. Ruth met him on the front steps when she arrived. Witness? The cab driver saw them. Did Mr. Pike remain outside? He says he walked around the side of the house and returned. Anyone see him? No. Any other family? Owen's wife, Clara Hale, is staying in Connecticut. Jonathan's younger brother died 10 years ago. Staff names? housekeeper Ada Wells, cook Nora Blake, valet William Kerr, secretary Simon Trent. I wrote them down. Bell said, Jonathan's solicitor had dined at the house earlier but left at 8:40. He has confirmed that he saw nothing connected to the later crime. Wolf's mouth tightened. You have supplied 8 possible liars and 1 ribbon. What do you want? I want to know why Hale marked a blank page on the night he was killed. That is not a service. It is curiosity. I will pay. That improves its dignity. Bell took an envelope from his pocket and placed it on my desk. I opened it. Inside were $50 bills. Wolf looked at me. 5,000, I said. Bell added, Hale's estate will not retain you. This is mine. Why? Wolf asked. Because Hale hired me and died before I could protect him. You were hired to investigate theft. Not to provide physical protection. That distinction may satisfy a contract, but not you. No. Wolf looked toward the clock. It was 11:37. Lunch waited 13 minutes away. What did Rowan conclude? That Hale locked the office after admitting the killer, or that the killer left through a concealed route not yet found. And suspects. Owen Hale is first. His fingerprints are on the paperweight. He owes more than $60,000. Jonathan had threatened to cut him from the will. Motive, access, temper. Yes, why is he not arrested? Because he was seen at the Manhattan Club from 9:40 until 10:20. The club is 20 minutes from Grayford House. He could have reached the house near the end of the medical examiner's interval, but not easily. Did he leave the club at 10:20? He says 10:30. The porter says 10:20. A waiter saw him at 10:15. Transportation. His car was at the club. It reached the house at 11:35 after the police. He could have taken a cab and sent the car later. Yes. Who drove it? His chauffeur, who claims Owen telephoned him at 11:20 and ordered him to bring it. From where did Owen telephone? He says from a friend's apartment. Confirmed. Not yet. Wolf shifted in his chair. What reason had Mr. Hale for reviewing an account book containing 15 years of private payments? Bell took a folded paper from his breast pocket. This was in his desk blotter. He handed it to me. I crossed to Wolf and placed it before him. It was a list in a strong, angular hand. Blue Ribbon March. 14-12 years. Ask Ruth no receipt blank is the entry. Wolf read it twice. I read it once over his shoulder. Bell said, Rowan has the original. I copied it. Wolf looked at the ribbon again. March 14th of which year? Unknown. 12 years before yesterday. Possibly. What entries appear near that date? The blank page falls in the portion of the book used 12 years ago. Page 62 includes payments dated March 12th and 13th. Page 64 begins March 15th. So the blank page occupies March 14th. Yes, I said. A whole day with no entries. Bell nodded. Wolf's eyes half closed. What occurred in the Hale family 12 years ago on March 14th? Ruth claims she remembers nothing unusual. Owen? He was 21 and traveling in Europe. Pike? He says he was in Boston on business. Simon Trent? She had not yet become Hale's secretary. Edwin Marsh. He prepared a trust agreement for Hale that month. What trust? Ruth would not explain. Wolf made a sound of disgust. Families do not become secretive because a date is unimportant. I returned to my desk. Bell said, There is another fact. Of course, Wolf said. Jonathan Hale's office was not actually locked when Ruth reached. I stopped writing. Wolf's eyes opened fully. You said it was locked. It was locked when I tried it after entering the house. Explain. Ruth says she found the door standing open by 3 inches. She saw Jonathan on the floor and screamed. When I entered the hall seconds later, the door was closed and locked. Who closed it? She says she did not. Was anyone else in the hall? Graham Pike had entered behind her. Owen arrived from the rear corridor almost immediately. Simon Trent came down from the office wing. I said, So one of them shut and locked the door during the confusion. Possibly. Why did you describe it as a locked room murder? Because when the police arrived, the door was locked, the key was inside, and everyone denied touching it. Wolf looked at him with deep disapproval. You permitted me to waste questions on an impossibility manufactured after discovery. I wanted to see whether you would notice the distinction. Wolf's face became still. That is dangerous. When Wolf is visibly angry, a man may defend himself. When his face becomes still, Defense has usually missed its appointment. Bell met his gaze. After a moment, Wolf said, "Mr. Bell, experiments require consent. You are not qualified to test me. I needed to know whether you would accept the locked room. I accepted your statement because language is the instrument by which men exchange facts. If you use it to exchange traps, conversation becomes useless." Bell inclined his head. "You are right," Wolf grunted. I said, "Also, he dislikes being tested before lunch." Bell looked at me. I gathered that. Wolf ignored us. Who could have locked the door? Anyone in the hall? The lock catches automatically when the door closes, but the key must be turned from inside to secure the deadbolt. The key remained inside. Yes, then if the door had merely swung shut, it would be latched, not bolted. It was bolted when I tried it. Who confirmed? I did. The handle would not move, and the deadbolt could be seen when the police removed the hinge pins. Could someone reach the key through the opening before closing the door? The key was in the inside face of the lock. A person standing outside could reach through a 3-inch gap, turn it partly, then pull the door shut with a cord. Cord found? No. Could the ribbon serve? Bell looked at the blue strip. It is long enough to loop around the key. Wolf shook his head. Silk would slip unless knotted. Any knot marks? Bell handed it to me. I brought it closer to the lamp. The crease near the middle was sharper than the others. One end had a small flattened curl, as though it had been wrapped around something narrow. "There is pressure near the end," I said. Wolf extended his hand. I gave it to him. He examined it without enthusiasm. This ribbon may have marked a page, turned a key, tied a parcel, or decorated a foolish hat. Its versatility is not evidence, Bell said, but someone removed it from the lock and returned it to the account book. Perhaps. Why? To make the marked page important, or to make it appear unimportant, I said. Wolf glanced at me. Bell said, "That is why I came." Wolf placed the ribbon on the desk. "Where is the account book now?" "Police laboratory. Can you obtain it?" "I can try. Do not try." "Obtain it." Bell smiled slightly. "You are taking the case?" "I am considering whether your $5,000 should remain in this house." "That is close enough. It is not." The telephone rang. I answered. "Mr. Wolf's office." "Archie Goodwin speaking," a woman said. "I must speak with Mr. Bell." Her voice was low, controlled, and frightened enough to make the control interesting. "Who is calling?" "Simon Trent." I covered the transmitter. "Hale's secretary." Bell took the phone at my desk. "This is Bell." He listened. His face changed. "When?" Another pause. "Touch nothing. Lock the door and wait." He hung up. "What?" I asked. Miriam returned to Jonathan Hale's office to retrieve correspondence under police supervision. The account book drawer had been searched. "The police have the account book," I said. "Yes, but something was written on the wood beneath it." "What?" Bell looked at Wolf. "A name." "Whose?" Wolf asked. "Ruth Hale." The office was quiet. Wolf's fingers pressed against the arms of his chair. Bell continued. "Miriam says the writing was hidden beneath the drawer lining. She found it because the lining had been pulled loose." "Handwriting?" Wolf asked. "Jonathan Hale's, she thinks." "What exactly was written?" "Ruth knows why the page is blank." Wolf looked at the blue ribbon. The ribbon had entered our office as an oddity. It now sat between a dead man's private note and his sister's denial. Wolf said, "Archie, call Inspector Rowan." I reached for the telephone. Bell stood. "You are taking the case." Wolf's shoulders rose and fell. Mr. Hale marked a blank page, wrote that blankness itself was an entry, summoned you and was killed before explaining. His sister denies knowledge of the date, yet his hidden message names her. Someone then converted the office into a false locked room and left the account book displayed. So the murderer did not merely wish Jonathan Hale dead. He wished the blank page interpreted incorrectly. I paused with my finger in the dial. Bell said, "What is the correct interpretation?" Wolf leaned back and closed his eyes. "A blank page can mean that nothing occurred. He opened them again, or that something occurred, which no one dared record. The clock showed 11:48. Lunch was 2 minutes. Away, Fritz appeared at the office door and announced that the shad roe was ready. Wolf rose. Immediately, Bell stared. "You are going to eat?" "Yes." "A woman may be in danger. Then Mr. Goodwin will telephone Inspector Rowan while I wash my hands." He moved toward the dining room, stopped, and looked back at the ribbon. Also, Archie, tell Inspector Rowan that no member of the Hale household is to touch the account book, the desk lock, or the office curtains. Why the curtains? Because Mr. Bell saw light through them, but not the desk. Someone inside the room knew precisely how much could be observed from the courtyard. Bell said, "You think the killer entered through the window?" "No. I think the killer wanted you to think about entrances when you should have been thinking about what was removed." What was removed? Wolf's gaze settled on the blank space between pages 62 and 64. An account. He went to lunch. I called Rowan. Outside, New York moved under a pale November sky. Unaware that 12 years earlier, a wealthy family had passed through a day no one had written down. Jonathan. Hale had remembered it. He had marked the missing entry with a blue ribbon. Someone had killed him before he could say what belonged on the page. Chapter 2. The respectable household Grayford. House looked respectable enough to have committed murder by committee. It stood behind black railings on East 68th Street, broad, polished, and silent. Arthur Bell paused beside me on the pavement and studied the curtained windows. "What does it tell you?" he asked. "That it has money, servants, and several rooms designed for lying." Inspector Rowan met us inside. He was tall, smooth, and careful, with a voice trained to make impatience sound official. He stood outside Jonathan Hale's sealed office with one hand on the key. "You have 10 minutes. I was promised 15. I said. "You were promised access." Bell showed him Hale's letter retaining him to investigate theft. Rowan glanced at it. "The client is dead." "The theft may not be." The mention of Wolf changed the air enough for Rowan to unlock the door. Hale's office was large, dark, and ordered like a bank vault. The body had been removed, but chalk marks showed where he had fallen and where the bronze ship paperweight had landed. The center drawer stood open. Its lining had been lifted and sealed in an evidence envelope. On the wood beneath it were 6 faint words. "Ruth knows why the page is blank." Bell bent over them. "His handwriting." "His clerk confirmed it," Rowan said. "Simon Trent." Yes, no lock had been forced. Hale's own key had opened the drawer. Someone had taken out the book, displayed it on the desk, and arranged the blue ribbon across the blank page. Rowan said, "The killer searched for financial records." "No," Bell replied. "The drawer was disturbed. That shows what the killer wanted you to think." I inspected the curtains. From the courtyard, a watcher could see the office light, but not the desk. A narrow streak crossed the dust on the windowsill. "Something lay here," I said. "The ribbon?" Bell asked. "Possibly," Rowan frowned. "You are trying to create a trick where none is needed." "Someone closed and bolted the office after Ruth Hale found the body," Bell said. 5 people lied about touching the door. People lie during panic. Then let us ask what frightened them. The 5 members of the household waited in the drawing room. Owen Hale stood near the fireplace. Handsome, restless, and expensive. He had debts, expectations, and an unlit cigarette. Ruth Hale sat upright on a blue sofa in grey silk, silver-haired and controlled. Simon Trent, Hale's private clerk, occupied a narrow chair near the writing desk. He was pale and neat, with ink on 2 fingers. Kyda Wells, the housekeeper, stood by the door in severe black. Martin Pike, Hale's former business associate, watched us from the window. All 5 called the account book dull, old, and useless. All 5 knew exactly where it had been kept. Bell began with Owen. "When did you last see it?" "Yesterday afternoon. It was in a locked drawer. I may have seen it another day." "Which day?" "I don't remember," Ruth said. "Jonathan often left it on his desk." Simon Trent shook his head. "No, I returned it to the center drawer each evening." Bell turned to him. "Each evening?" "Yes." "Who gave you the key?" "Mr. Hale." "When did you last put the book away?" "At 6 yesterday." "Was the blue ribbon in it?" Simon hesitated. "No," Bell asked. "Was page 63 blank?" "I did not examine it. You entered figures in the book for 11 years and never noticed a blank page between March 13th and 15th. "I noticed many unused spaces." "A whole page?" "I do not remember." Wolf would have appreciated the answer. It contained caution, fear, and no truth. I looked at Ruth. "You told Bell that Jonathan had been reviewing old household expenses." "How did you know?" "He mentioned accounts from 12 years ago." "Did he mention March 14th? "No." "The blank page?" "No." "Then why were you certain the ribbon meant nothing?" Jonathan marked pages carelessly. Simon says it was not there at 6. Her hands tightened slightly. My brother did many things after 6. Did he write the hidden message naming you after 6? Her eyes cooled. My brother had become suspicious. That is not an answer. It is the only one I have. Belle turned to Owen. Again, you owed Jonathan more than $60,000. That is private. It became public when he died. He was helping me reorganize investments. He threatened to remove you from his will. He threatened everyone. Did you enter the office last night? No. You appeared from the rear corridor after Ruth screamed. I came through the rear door, Belle said. That door was bolted from inside at 10:30. Ada must have opened it. Ada spoke quietly. I did not. Owen looked at her. The door was open. Then someone opened it before you arrived. Rowan checked his notebook. Your statement says you came in behind your aunt. I meant I reached the house at the same time. Through another entrance? Yes, why? The front steps were crowded. With Ruth, Pike, Belle, and a cab driver, I said. That is not a crowd. It is an audience, Owen glared. Belle faced Martin Pike. Why were you here? Jonathan telephoned at 9:30 and demanded I come. What did he say? That he had found proof of an old wrong and intended to correct it. Did he mention Charles Wells? Pike touched his gold watch chain. Yes, Ada lowered her eyes. Belle looked at her. Who was Charles Wells? My husband. What happened to him? He was dismissed from this house 12 years ago on March 14th. The room became still. Why? Belle asked. He was accused of stealing $5,000 from the household reserve. Was he guilty? No, Ruth said sharply. Ada. The housekeeper faced her. He was not. What happened after his dismissal? I asked. He could not find steady work. 7 months later, he walked into the river. The blank page had acquired a dead man of its own. Belle's voice softened. Was the money ever found? Ada looked at Ruth. Mr. Hale found it in a locked household box, Ruth stood. That is false. Ada did not turn. 1 year after Charles died, Mr. Hale paid me $5,000. He called it compensation. Did he admit the accusation was false? Not in writing. Was the payment entered in the account book? I do not know. I watched Ruth. Did you take the original money? No. Did Jonathan believe you did? No. Then why did he write that you knew why the page was blank? I cannot answer for a dead man's confusion. Martin Pike spoke from the window. Jonathan was not confused. Belle turned. What did he tell you? He said Charles Wells had been innocent. He said an old account had returned to trouble him. What account? He did not say. You were Jonathan's business associate 12 years ago. Were you in this house on March 14th? I visited often. That means yes, I may have been. Did Jonathan pay you that day? Pike's hand dropped from his watch chain. No. The denial arrived too quickly. Simon Trent said, This has nothing to do with the murder. A blank page is not evidence, Belle turned. Then why did Jonathan mark it before he died? He may have intended to write something. Or someone removed what had been written. Rowan said, The laboratory found no erasure. Belle nodded. Then perhaps the writing was never removed from the paper. Simon frowned. The page marks a transaction that should have been entered, but was deliberately omitted, Belle said. Ada whispered. $5,000. Ruth's voice sharpened. Stop. Ada looked at her. No, madam. Belle held up the ribbon. It did not hide a written secret. It pointed to the place where writing had been removed from the history of this household. Rowan crossed his arms. Theory. Then obtained the supporting vouchers for March 14th. Simon answered too fast. They were destroyed years ago. Belle faced him. By whose order? Mr. Hale's. Written? No. Who destroyed them? I did. When? 8 years ago. Then you knew which records surrounded the blank page and I destroyed old paper. Nothing more. Yesterday, Hale told me he had found the entry that mattered. If the vouchers were destroyed, where did he find it? Simon said nothing. From the hall came the faint sound of a drawer closing. Ada turned her head. The key rack. Rowan went first. We followed. The front hall was empty, but a side table drawer stood open. Ada checked it. The records room key is gone. Belle was already moving. The records room lay beneath the office wing. Its door stood unlocked. Shelves held household bills, servant files, tax papers, and correspondence. One box lay open on the floor. Its label read Household Vouchers 12 years prior. It was empty. A trail of ash ran from it to a small furnace grate. Rowan touched the metal. Warm. Someone had burned the records while the 5 suspects remained in the drawing room. Either one slipped out, I said. Or someone else is in the house. Bell examined the grate with tweezers. Near the edge, one corner of a voucher had escaped the flame. Only 3 handwritten words remained. Paid to Miss Pike. Bell looked toward the passage. Martin Pike. We ran back. Pike was gone. The drawing room window stood open, and cold air moved the curtain. Owen leaned over the sill. He went through the garden. Rowan called for officers. Bell turned to Ruth. She had returned to the sofa, pale but composed. You knew about the payment. Her voice was low. I knew Jonathan paid Pike. What for? She looked at Ada. To keep Charles from telling Jonathan the truth. Ada went still. What truth? Ruth closed her eyes. I cannot say. You can. No. Then Jonathan died because you chose silence twice. Her eyes opened. Do not accuse me. I accuse no one yet. I am counting fear. Simon rose. This has gone far enough. No, Bell said. It went too far 12 years ago. Rowan returned. Pike crossed the garden wall. My men are searching the block. Owen laughed bitterly. So Pike killed Uncle Jonathan. Flight proves fear, Bell said. It does not prove murder. He burned the vouchers. He may have. He was paid. Yes. What more do you need? The reason. Owen turned away. Bell placed the surviving voucher fragment on the table. $5,000 vanished. Charles Wells was accused. Martin Pike was secretly paid. Jonathan marked the missing entry and died before explaining it. Ada said, Charles knew who took the money. Ruth looked at her sharply. Did he tell you? Bell asked. Not the name. He said the thief was protected because the truth would destroy the family. Protected by Jonathan? By someone Jonathan loved. Everyone looked at Ruth. Simon said, This is servant gossip. Ada faced him. You were not here then. No, but I know Hale's habits. He recorded every meaningful payment, except this one. Bell said, That proves it never happened. The burned voucher proves it did. The fragment could belong to another date. Then why burn the whole box tonight? No one answered. I looked around the room. Owen had debts and lied about the rear door. Ruth knew the date and refused to explain it. Simon knew the book's location, the missing ribbon and the destroyed vouchers. Ada had carried 12 years of anger behind a servant's face. Pike had been paid, lied and fled. 5. Respectable people. 5 reasons to fear one old. Account. Rowan picked up the fragment. The killer searched for financial records and failed. Bell shook his head. The killer found exactly what was wanted. What? The chance to make us believe this murder concerned stolen money. Hale retained you to investigate theft. Yes, but not a current theft. He wanted me to investigate an unrecorded payment from 12 years ago. Then why disturb the drawer? To suggest a search. Why display the book? To direct us toward the blank page but away from the missing voucher. That makes no sense. It does if the page could accuse several people while the voucher accused one. Pike, I said. Or whoever used Pike's name, Bell replied. The front bell rang. An officer returned carrying a wet brown envelope found on the steps. It was addressed to Arthur Bell. Inside was a sheet torn from an old ledger. The writing was Jonathan Hale's March 14 paid Martin Pike. $5,000 for silence regarding Ruth and Charles Wells. Below it in newer ink Hale had added, the account was false. The silence was murder. Ada covered her mouth. Ruth stared. Simon took one involuntary step backward. Bell looked toward the open window. Pike did not take the evidence. I said, no, he delivered it. Then why run? Because someone made him believe the surviving page named him as the killer. Rowan said, who left the envelope? The person who wants us to follow Pike. Bell folded the page carefully. The respectable household had agreed that the account book was dull, outdated and useless. Yet one man had fled. One box of vouchers had burned. One hidden payment had surfaced. And one dead servant had returned through a blank page. The ribbon had not. Marked an empty place. It marked the place where the household removed the truth and replaced it with silence. Chapter 3. The Torn Edge. The account book reached Arthur Bell at 10 the next morning in a locked police case and under-inspector. Rowan's expression of personal distrust. Rowan placed it on the library table at Grayford House. You have 20 minutes, he said. Bell looked at the lock. You gave me 10 yesterday. I am becoming generous. No, you are becoming curious. I stood near the fire with the blue ribbon in my pocket. Ruth was upstairs. Owen was searching for Pike. Simon Trent was in the rear office, and Ada Wells moved through the house with 12 years of patience. Rowan opened the case. The brown account book opened to page 63. Between entries dated March 13th and March 15th, the front was blank. Bell put on gloves and studied the page beneath the lamp. This page was not always exposed, he said. Rowan came closer. Meaning? There is roughness along the inner margin. Near the stitching, a narrow strip looked duller than the rest. The fibers had risen in a faint ridge. Something was glued over it, I said. Or repaired, Rowan replied. Bell shook his head. A repair would cover damage. This follows the full length of the page. He used a magnifying glass. The paste was softened and something thin was lifted away. The laboratory found no missing page. Rowan said, The page itself is here. Then what is missing? A sheet attached to it. I looked at the blank surface. Tracing paper? Perhaps. Something thin enough to hide writing without changing the binding. Why not tear out the whole page? Because a missing page announces itself. A blank one can be dismissed. Bell held the leaf toward the window. A faint waviness crossed its center. Heat, he said. This page was warmed recently. Find Ada. Ada came within 2 minutes. She stood beside the table but would not look at Rowan. Bell asked, What did Mr. Hale do with this book before dinner? He brought it from the office at 7, she said. The dining room fire was stronger. Did he open it to this page? Yes. He held it near the flame and said old ink sometimes needed warmth. Then he turned it away from me. What happened next? He asked for a flat iron. I heated one and brought it wrapped in cloth. What did he do? He laid a thin white sheet over the blank page, brushed something on it from a small brown bottle, covered it with blotting paper, and pressed the warm iron across it. Bell's eyes sharpened. He was transferring the writing. Did anything appear? Rowan asked. I saw dark lines near one edge. Words? I could not read them. What happened to the sheet? He carried it back to the office. Was it found after his death? Rowan answered. No. Bell looked at the rough edge. The murderer removed it. Ada said, Mr. Hale was alive when I left him. What time? 7:35. Who knew what he had done? She looked toward the door. Miss Ruth entered while he was heating the page. What did Jonathan say? Ada's voice lowered. He said, It is still there. Charles was right. And Ruth? She said, Then burn it. Silence followed. What did Hale answer? Bell asked. He laughed once. He said, You have had 12 years of fire. Then Miss Ruth left. Why did you not tell us yesterday? I knew Miss Ruth would deny it. I work in her house. Bell dismissed her, but I followed her into the hall. One thing. Did Jonathan place the ribbon before or after heating the page? After? You saw him? Yes, he tied it around the book and tucked one end between the pages. Why? He said, Now Bell will know where to look. I wrote it down. When I returned, I told Bell that Hale had placed the ribbon after the experiment. He expected to explain it in person, Bell said. Instead, somebody explained it with a bronze ship. Rowan closed the case halfway. If the sheet existed, that is what the killer searched for. Not money records, Bell said. The book was left because the evidence had been lifted from it. The blank page held writing revived by heat, I said, or transferred by a reagent, Bell replied. Hale imported inks, paper, and sealing materials. What would it say? Rowan asked. Something Charles Wells wrote before he died. Rowan shut the case. Speculation. Bell stopped him with one gloved hand, then explained the rough edge. The heat marks, the reagent, and the missing sheet. It may never have existed. Bell's voice remained calm. Your theory requires every fact to be accidental. That is laziness. I said, Before you arrest each other, we should search Jonathan's fireplace. My men searched the office, Rowan said, for weapons, papers, and money. Did they sift the ash? He did not answer. We went to the office and spread the cold fireplace ash across newspapers. Near the back, Bell found a curled strip of thin white material hardly larger than my thumb. One edge showed faint blue lines. Writing. Rowan asked. Bell lifted it with tweezers. Part of the transfer sheet. The marks were incomplete. Half a capital W. a downward stroke and the end of a number. The brown bottle was gone, but a circular stain and glass stopper remained in the center drawer. I checked the wastebasket. One narrow scrap remained beneath the metal rim. It was blue paper, not silk. On the back was a single handwritten letter. P. Bell took it. The transfer sheet may have been mounted on blue backing. A shadow crossed the doorway. Simon. Trent stood there. He looked at the account book, the ashtray and the blue scrap. What are you doing? Finding what was removed, Bell said. The police already searched. They searched for a document. We are searching for its skin. I do not understand. You returned the account book every night. Did Jonathan ever use invisible ink in it? No. Did Charles Wells? I never knew him. Simon's gaze dropped to the blue fragment. Bell saw it. Recognized this? No. You looked before answering. I looked because you held it up. Where were you between 7:30 and 8? In the rear office. I did not enter the study. Did you know Ruth asked him to burn the recovered writing? Simon's eyes shifted. No. Bell stepped closer. Who told you there was recovered writing? Simon stopped breathing for a second. I said, that was neat. Simon's mouth tightened. I inferred it from your questions. Then infer where the sheet went. I cannot. Someone burned part of it here. Someone removed the rest. Someone killed Jonathan before he could show it to me. You have no proof the sheet caused the murder. The bronze ship suggests urgency. Rowan moved nearer. Mr. Trent, remain in the house. I had no intention of leaving. That makes you unusual. Simon turned and walked away. Bell watched him go. He knows what the writing said, or thinks he does, I said. Rowan sealed the fragments. We returned to the library. The account book lay open beneath the lamp, the page pale and innocent between dated entries. Bell warmed the lower corner with the lamp. Slowly, several grey marks emerged near the inner margin, not enough for a sentence, enough for a name. Wells. Ada had been right. Jonathan had watched the page as if waiting for it to speak. Charles Wells had left something there 12 years ago beneath a pasted sheet. Jonathan had revived part of it with heat and marked the place for Bell. The killer took the transfer, burned a fragment, and left the book because it looked empty. Bell closed it. The page was never blank. Rowan asked what was written. Bell glanced toward Ruth's staircase and Simon's office. Something worth killing for. I placed the blue ribbon beside the book. The household had feared a written accusation. What Jonathan Hale found was more dangerous. It was an accusation no one had known still existed, until he warmed the page and made the dead man speak. Chapter 4. The Account That Did Not Balance. Simon Trent. Asked to speak with Arthur Bell alone, then objected when I prepared to leave. Mr. Goodwin may stay, he said quickly. We met in Jonathan Hale's library at 3, with Inspector Rowan near the door. Mr. Hale discovered a hidden loss in the estate accounts, Simon said. How large? Bell asked. $38,460. Taken at once? No, in small payments over years. Repairs, deliveries, servant wages, garden work, storage fees. To real people. Most names were invented. The addresses were false. Some receipts carried signatures, but no such tradesmen or servants existed. Who authorized them? Mr. Hale's initials appeared beside many. Genuine? Some others were imitated. By whom? Simon looked at the carpet. He had not told me. The first payments began before I came. When? 12 years ago. March 14th? Simon's face answered before his mouth. Near that date, he produced 2 columns of figures. The first series totaled $19,230. The second began 18 months ago and reached exactly the same total. Somebody paid twice for the same silence, I said. Bell asked, what silence? I don't know. You lied yesterday. I was afraid of the name he had found. Whose name? He never spoke it. Then what did you see? Simon swallowed. Yesterday evening I saw him warming the blank page. He placed a treated sheet over it and pressed it with a flat iron. Writing appeared. How much did you read? Only part. Repeat it and pay Martin Pike $5,000. Charge repairs. Charles knows. Ruth must never learn. The line differed from the page delivered anonymously to Bell, which claimed Pike had been paid for silence concerning Ruth and Charles Wells. Whose handwriting? Bell asked. Jonathan's? Was there a signature? The final line was missing. The copy ended at a torn edge. Mr. Hale believed the missing portion had been attached to the original voucher. Who knew? Ruth, Owen, Pike, Ada, I did. Rowan asked, why was this omitted from your statement? Because Mr. Hale said the name would destroy this family. Bell said, Charles Wells was accused of stealing $5,000 on March 14th. Martin Pike secretly received $5,000 that day. False payments continued until they totaled $19,230. 18 months ago, a second series began and reached the identical amount yesterday. Yes. Who supplied the recent invoices? Ruth Hale. Owen approved them. Bell asked, what was the final payment? Repairs to the North Greenhouse. Grayford House has no North Greenhouse, I said. It was demolished 12 years ago. $480. It completed the matching total. Where is the invoice? In Jonathan's desk when I last saw it. Rowan checked his list. No such invoice was recovered. We went to Hale's office. The center drawer remained open. Bell found a fresh smear of red sealing wax beneath it. He pressed the rear panel, and a narrow strip sprang loose, revealing a shallow compartment. Inside lay one red envelope. It was empty. Jonathan had written, Final payment. Ask who benefits if Charles remains a thief. A pike beneath a crown remained in the wax. A Martin Pike seal, Rowan said, or his stamp. Bell replied. Pike fled, received the payment, and used this seal for questioning, not murder. A blue fiber matching the ribbon clung to the wax. Bell looked at Simon. Were the false invoices delivered in red envelopes? Yes. Who possessed Pike's seal? Pike wore one. Jonathan kept a duplicate. Ruth had an old household stamp. Simon stared at the empty envelope. The invoice was removed by the killer. Likely, Bell said. We returned to the library. Had Wells entered with coffee, saw the envelope and stopped. You recognize it? Bell asked. Yes. Where did you see one like it? Charles had it the night before Mr. Hale dismissed him. Sealed with Pike's crest? Yes. What was inside? I never saw. What did Charles say? That it proved he had not stolen the money. Who took it? Ada looked toward the staircase, Miss Ruth. When? March 13th, after dinner. She promised to show Jonathan the next morning. Did she? No, Jonathan accused Charles before breakfast. Simon whispered. Then Ruth held the proof. Ada's face tightened. She held it. And Charles died a thief. Bell asked, why did you protect her yesterday? I served this family for 30 years. It explains the shame. Did Charles mention the blank page? Yes, he said he had pressed the payment instruction against it, while the ink was fresh. He said if the paper was destroyed, the book would remember. The instruction had left a hidden copy on page 63. Bell said, then the line Simon read was genuine. Simon nodded. Pay Pike $5,000. Charge repairs. Charles knows. Ruth must never learn. If Ruth was not meant to know, why did she take the envelope? Because she discovered the truth that night, Bell said, and protected whoever authorized the payment. Who? Rowan asked. Bell looked toward the upper floor. Jonathan had not told anyone whose name he found, I said, but whoever removed the final invoice knew. Ruth Hale entered, composed and pale. You have questioned my servants long enough. Bell held up the red envelope. Why did you take this from Charles Wells? Her eyes fixed on it. I did not. Ada saw you. Ada is confused by grief. Charles said it proved his innocence. Charles was a thief. Jonathan no longer believed that. Bell said, my brother had become obsessed. With $38,000? Bell continued. You supplied false invoices for 18 months. I carried papers Jonathan asked me to carry. For repairs to a greenhouse demolished 12 years ago? Owen handled repairs. Owen approved what you placed before him. That is his responsibility. And the first series, I know nothing about it. Both groups total the same amount. That is not ordinary theft. It is a repeated demand. Ruth said nothing. Who demanded payment? I cannot help you. Cannot or will not. There are truths that do more harm than silence. Stared. That is what you told Charles. Ruth turned. Ada's voice rose for the first time. You said the family would survive if one servant carried the shame. Ruth went. White. Rowan stepped closer. What truth was Charles protecting? I will say nothing without my solicitor. She left and Rowan sent an officer after her. The account does not balance, Bell said. The figures do, I replied. The figures are exact. The history is false. The first payment was ordered without Ruth's knowledge. Later, she obtained the proof and hid it. The recent payments came through her hands. The victim of the first secret may have become keeper of the second, or blackmailer, Rowan said. Possibly. Simon asked, "Who received the recent money?" Bell looked at the empty envelope. "That is the missing entry." Jonathan Hale found the matching totals, warmed the blank page, and recovered the instruction connecting them. Before he could reveal the name below the torn edge, someone removed the final invoice and killed him. Bell placed the ribbon beside the envelope. "The murderer expected us to chase stolen money," Rowan asked. "What should we chase?" "The respectable name the money kept clean." From upstairs came the sound of a door closing. In Grayford House, every quiet sound had begun to resemble an entry someone hoped would never be written. Chapter 5. The ribbon's owner, Ruth. Hale said the blue ribbon came from an old sewing box in the morning room. She said it calmly, which was unfortunate for her, because Ada Wells said the sewing box had been locked for 3 years, and the key was missing. Arthur Bell received both statements at breakfast in Grayford House, though no one was eating. Ruth sat at the long dining table with untouched coffee before her. Owen stood near the window. Simon Trent waited beside the sideboard with a bundle of office keys in his hand. Inspector Rowan occupied the chair at the head of the table, as though the police had inherited it. I leaned against the mantel. Bell placed the ribbon on the white cloth between them. "Who owned it?" he asked. Ruth answered first. "It belonged to my mother. There are dozens like it in her sewing box. Ada says the box has not been opened in years. Ada does not know everything that happens in this house." Ada stood near the door. Her face showed nothing. Bell said, "Where is the key?" "I do not know." "Who last used the box?" "I may have." "When?" "Months ago." "For what?" "To mend a cushion. With blue silk." "I do not remember." Bell picked up the ribbon and turned toward Simon. The bundle of office keys in Simon's hand was tied with a narrow strip of dark blue silk. It matched the ribbon in color, width and weave. Simon saw Bell looking and closed his fingers around it. "That ribbon came from the stationery cupboard," he said. "Not Ruth's sewing box?" "I cannot say where the household supply originated." "Do many people tie keys with silk?" "It prevents them rattling." "Did Jonathan dislike rattling keys?" "He disliked noise." "So do thieves," I said. Simon's eyes moved toward me and away. Bell took the key bundle. The silk around it had been knotted twice. One end had recently been cut. The edge was sharp and clean, while the ribbon from the account book had one end frayed and the other cut in the same direction. Bell laid them together. They were once one strip. Simon's hands began to shake, not violently. "A careful man shakes carefully," Rowan noticed. "Mr. Trent?" Simon clasped his hands behind him. "This proves only that the ribbon came from the office supply," Bell said. "You told us yesterday that no ribbon was in the account book when you returned it to the locked drawer at 6. "That is true. Then someone added it after dinner." "Yes." "Who touched the book?" "I do not know." Bell's voice remained mild. "Your hands disagree." Simon looked at him. "What do you mean?" "They began shaking when I asked who touched the account book after dinner, not when I matched the ribbon." Simon's face tightened. "I am tired." "Were you tired when Jonathan warmed the blank page?" "I saw only part of that." "Were you present when he placed the ribbon?" "No." "Did you enter the office after dinner?" "No." "Did you give anyone the center drawer key?" "No." "Did anyone borrow your office keys?" "No." Bell held up the bundle. "One is missing." Simon looked. The brass ring held 7 keys. A narrow gap separated 2 of them, and the silk had been retied around the ring to conceal the space. Rowan took the bundle. "Which key?" Simon swallowed. "The duplicate key to Mr. Hale's center drawer," Bell said. "You told us Jonathan carried the only key on his watch chain." "I said he usually did. You omitted the duplicate." "I forgot." "Where is it?" "I do not know." "Who knew it existed?" "Mr. Hale, myself, possibly Miss Ruth." Ruth's voice sharpened. "I knew nothing of it." Simon did not look at her. Bell asked, "When did you last see the duplicate?" "Yesterday afternoon." "Before or after 6? "Before." "Who handled your key bundle?" "No one." "Then either you used the key or you are protecting the person who took it." Simon's shaking stopped. That was more revealing than the shaking. "I am protecting no one." Bell nodded. That answer was prepared. Owen laughed from the window. "This is absurd. You have a ribbon, a missing key, and an old account." Meanwhile, the man who fled through the garden is still free. Martin Pike. Rowan said. Owen turned. Yes, Pike was in the office corridor before Uncle Jonathan died. Bell looked at him. You did not mention that yesterday. I was confused. Conveniently. I remembered during the night. What did you see? I entered through the rear door shortly after 10. Pike stood near the office passage. You said Pike was on the front steps when Ruth arrived after 11. He must have gone out and returned. What was he doing? He had one hand on the office door. Was it open? I could not tell. Did he see you? Yes. What did he say? That Jonathan was busy. What did you do? I went upstairs. Why not ask how Pike entered a house with locked doors? Owen's face hardened. He was a regular visitor. You lied yesterday about entering behind Ruth. I corrected that. You also claimed Ada opened the rear door. I was mistaken. Bell stepped closer. Did you see Pike in the corridor? Or are you moving him there because he has already fled? Owen's mouth tightened. I saw him. At what time? 10:15. Your club waiter saw you there at 10:15. Then 10:25. The club porter says you left at 10:20. It takes 5 minutes by cab if traffic is light. It takes 12. Owen looked at Rowan. You are letting him badger me, Rowan said. Answer him, Owen said. I did not check a clock. Bell nodded. That is the first honest sentence you have offered. Ruth rose. Owen has no reason to protect Martin Pike. No, Bell said. He has reason to accuse him. Why? Because Pike received the hidden payment. Pike fled. Pike's seal marked the envelope. Pike appears to fit every fact neatly enough to save everyone else. Ruth's eyes cooled. Perhaps because he is guilty. Perhaps because someone has been arranging guilt since Jonathan died. Simon said, Mr. Pike had access to the house. Not to the account book, Bell replied. He could have taken the drawer key. From your bundle? Simon did not answer. Bell continued. Pike was a visitor. He did not maintain the ledgers, prepare invoices, store household vouchers, or know when Jonathan removed the account book from its drawer. Yet every new accusation moves toward him. Rowan said, he received $5,000. According to a burned fragment and a recovered page delivered after his flight, he ran. Because someone warned him that the evidence named him. Owen said, You are defending him. I am defending Sequence. Bell turned to Rowan. Has Pike been found? No, his apartment is empty. His car remains in its garage. Telephone records. One call reached Grayford House at 6 yesterday evening from his office. To whom? The call was transferred to Simon Trent. Everyone looked at Simon. Rowan asked, What did Pike say? Simon's pale face became fixed. He asked whether Jonathan intended to meet him. Did you tell him yes, sir? Yes. Anything else? No. Bell said, Did you warn him about the account book? No. About the payment? No. About Charles Wells? No. Then why did Pike flee after the vouchers were burned? Simon said nothing. Bell picked up the ribbon tied around the key bundle. Because someone contacted him again, Rowan said. We found no second call. Not by telephone. Bell looked toward the office corridor. A note could have been placed where he would see it. Pike arrived before Ruth. He walked around the side of the house. Someone could have met him at the rear entrance. Owen said, How you are inventing. No, I am asking why a man who came to ask Jonathan for a loan suddenly believed he was about to be accused of murder. That was new. Rowan turned toward Owen. You said Pike came about an old wrong. He told us Jonathan had summoned him, Bell said. But Pike's note to his bank, found this morning, states that he expected to secure a personal loan of $20,000 from Jonathan. Ruth stared. Martin needed money? Badly, Owen said. Then he had motive. Not to kill the man he needed alive, unless Jonathan refused. Bell shook his head. Pike's debts explain why he came. They do not explain how he knew about the blank page, the hidden vouchers, or the key to the account drawer. Simon spoke quietly. He may have known from 12 years ago. Known what? That the payment was recorded. It was not recorded. That is why the page was blank. Simon realized the error. Bell watched him. You just admitted Pike believed there had been a written entry. Simon said nothing. Who told him? Still nothing. Ruth said, This questioning is finished. Rowan stood. No, Miss Hale. Her expression changed. She was accustomed to ending conversations by declaring them ended. Rowan continued. The duplicate drawer key is missing. Mr. Trent concealed its existence. The ribbon on his key bundle matches the ribbon used to mark the page. Until that is explained, no one leaves. Owen laughed bitterly. We are prisoners in our own house, Ada said from the doorway. Mr. Hale used to say a locked house only keeps honest people inconvenienced. Ruth turned on her. You have become remarkably talkative. Ada met her eyes. Was silent 12 years, that ended it. Belle asked Ada, did you see Simon's keys after dinner? Yes, when? At 8:15. They were hanging beside his desk. Was the blue ribbon intact? Yes, longer than it is now. Simon looked at her. You could not know that. I dust beneath the hook every evening. The ribbon hung almost to the drawer. Who entered the rear office? Miss Ruth at 8:20. Mr. Owen at 8:40. Mr. Pike at 9:35, Owen snapped. I was at my club. Ada looked at him. Then a man wearing your coat entered. The room became quiet. Belle said, describe him. Tall brown overcoat, hat low. I saw him from the service passage. Face. No. Did he go to Simon's desk? He remained there less than 2 minutes. Owen's eyes had narrowed. My coat was in the downstairs cloakroom before I went to the club. Who could take it? Belle asked. Anyone in the house? Pike? He has his own coat. Simon. Simon said, I was working in the typing room. Ruth? Ruth's stare was answer enough. Belle asked Ada, what happened after the man left? Simon returned and shut his desk drawer. Did he check the keys? No, Simon turned toward her. You watched closely. I had learned what happens when household records disappear. Belle took the matching ribbons and placed them on the dining table. The duplicate key was taken from Simon's desk by someone disguised in Owen's coat. That person opened Jonathan's center drawer after dinner, removed or examined the account book, and cut this ribbon from Simon's key bundle. To mark the blank page? Rowan asked. Yes. Why would the killer draw attention to it? To control how it was interpreted. I said, the ribbon made the page look like Jonathan's deliberate clue. It was Jonathan's clue, Ruth said. Belle looked at her. How do you know? She stopped. Belle continued. Ada saw Jonathan place a ribbon after warming the page, but the ribbon now in the book came from Simon's office bundle. Either Ada was mistaken about which ribbon he used, or someone replaced his original marker. Ada frowned. Mr. Hale's ribbon was lighter. That changed the room. Belle asked, how much lighter? Blue, but almost gray. The dark ribbon was substituted after his death. Yes, Rowan said. Why? Belle picked up the darker strip. Because Jonathan's original ribbon may have carried something. Ink? I asked. Reagent, writing, or a trace from the transferred sheet. The killer removed it and substituted this ribbon so the marked page remained visible, but the physical evidence vanished. Simon sat down. His face had gone grey. Belle turned to him. Who touched the book after dinner? Simon looked at Ruth. Ruth did not move. Then he looked at Owen. Owen's jaw tightened. Finally, Simon said, I saw Martin Pike carrying it. Belle did not react. When? At 10:40. Where? In the office passage. Owen claims he saw Pike at 10:15. Your time is later, conveniently closer to death. He had the book under his arm. Why did you not tell Rowan? I feared he would think I had given Pike the key. Did you? No. Belle moved closer. Simon Martin Pike had no access to the accounts. He did not know which drawer held the book, unless someone told him. He did not know the ribbon had been added after 6. He could not fabricate false invoices for 18 months. Yet every answer you give places the book in his hands. Simon's eyes lowered. Belle said, You are not accusing Pike because you saw him. You are repeating a story prepared for you. By whom? Rowan asked. Simon closed his eyes. Before he could answer, the telephone rang in the hall. Ada went to it. She returned holding a folded message. Inspector Rowan. A man called from a railway station. He says he is Martin Pike. Rowan took the paper. What does he want? To speak with Mr. Bell. Bell went to the telephone. We heard only his side. Bell speaking. A pause. Where are you? Another pause. No, do not come here. He listened longer. Then his face changed. When did you see it? Silence. Stay where you are. Rowan will send one man. He hung up. Rowan asked, what did he say? Bell looked at the ribbons. Pike says he never entered Jonathan's office. Corridor last night, Owen snorted. Of course. He also says Simon sent him a note at 10:50 telling him, Jonathan had been murdered and that the account book named Pike as Charles Wells's blackmailer. Rowan turned toward Simon. Simon whispered, "I sent no note." "Pike kept it," Bell said. "Handwriting?" "Block letters." I said, like someone who did not want to be recognized. Bell nodded. "Pike fled because he believed the household had already chosen him." Ruth sat very still. Bell looked around the dining room. The accusations moved toward the only man who could be blamed for receiving money, but could not explain how the accounts were manipulated. Rowan said, "Then Pike is bait." "No, he is the intended answer." Bell placed the matching ribbon strips side by side. The murderer replaced Jonathan's marker, stole Simon's duplicate key, wore Owen's coat, sent Pike a warning, and depended upon Ruth's old secret to make every lie appear connected. "Who could do all that?" I asked. Bell looked at the respectable faces around the table, someone with access to the household, the office, the accounts, and all four of them. Simon's hands began to shake again. This time, no one pretended not to see. Chapter 6. The Heat. Mark Arthur Bell asked for a reading lamp, a silver tray, and a room in which no member of the Hale family could touch either. Inspector Rowan provided the library and 2 officers at the door. Ada Wells brought the lamp. Simon Trent carried in the account book under Rowan's supervision. Though his hands were unsteady enough to make the book appear heavier than it was, Ruth Hale refused to attend. Bell said she would. 10 minutes later, she entered with Owen behind her. Ruth wore black instead of grey, as though the investigation had finally earned formal mourning. Owen looked tired, angry, and too carefully shaved. I closed the library door. The blue ribbon lay on the tray beside the account book. Bell had placed both matching strips there, Jonathan's substituted marker, and the shortened ribbon from Simon's key bundle. Rowan said, "The laboratory already tested the page. For ordinary ink," Bell replied. "They used heat. Too much and too quickly." Simon looked toward the lamp. "What do you expect to find?" "Whatever survived the scraping." Ruth stopped beside the table. "You said the page had not been erased." "The surface was not rubbed like a schoolboy's exercise," Bell said. "A thin pasted sheet was lifted away. But the pressure of the original writing marked the page beneath it, and some of the liquid passed through. Then the laboratory would have seen it. The laboratory searched for a complete message." "I am searching for fragments." Bell opened the book to page 63. In daylight it was blank except for the faint roughness near the spine and the pale grey shadow of Wells that had appeared under warmth. Under the lamp the page looked ordinary. Bell adjusted the shade until the light fell low across the paper. "Mr. Goodwin, draw the curtains." I did. The library darkened except for the pool of yellow light around the book. The respectable faces gathered beyond it became less definite, which improved some of them. Bell held the page upright several inches from the lamp. "Do not bring it closer." Rowan said, "I know paper burns. I am required to mention it. You have." For half a minute nothing happened. Then a pale brown line appeared near the top of the page. Owen leaned forward. "It's only discoloration." Bell did not answer. The line darkened and separated into figures to 14 down below it. Another patch rose slowly from the fibers. The writing was incomplete, but enough remained to read "Roof repair. North wing Greyford House had no north wing. Simon." Trent closed his eyes. Bell lowered the page. "You recognize it?" Simon said nothing. Bell warmed the middle section. A second entry appeared in broken strokes. "Coal 6 tons lower cellar." Ada Wells spoke from near the door. "The lower cellar was sealed before that winter." Bell looked at her. "Why?" "Flood damage." No coal was stored there for 2 years. The final surviving entry emerged near the bottom of the page. Charity. Wells Relief Fund. Ada gripped the back of a chair. There was no relief fund. Ruth sat down. The 3 entries were faint, damaged and separated by scraped spaces. Each had a small mark beside it, a narrow slanting line followed by a loop. Simon whispered, "RH." Rowan turned. "Ruth Hale?" Simon nodded. Ruth's face had gone white. Bell laid the page flat. 3 false payments, he said. A roof repair for a wing that never existed. A coal order for a cellar that could not receive coal. A charity payment to a fund that was never formed. Owen stared at his aunt. "You approved them?" Ruth said nothing. Bell continued. Simon prepared the books. Ruth approved the vouchers. Jonathan's hidden copy preserved both facts where neither expected a ledger to accuse them. Ruth looked at Simon. "You told me the marks were gone." Simon's head came up sharply. That sentence did more than the heat. Rowan stepped nearer. "When did he tell you?" Ruth realized what she had admitted. "I meant Jonathan." "No," Belle said. "You meant Simon." Simon rose. "She's confused. Sit down," Rowan ordered. Simon sat. Belle looked at Ruth. "You knew the blank page carried traces." She pressed a handkerchief to her lips. "I knew Jonathan believed it did." "You watched him warm." "Yes." "You told him to burn what appeared." "Was afraid of being exposed as a thief." Her eyes filled. "I did not steal for pleasure." Owen gave a harsh laugh. "That is usually said by people who stole successfully." Ruth turned on him. "You know nothing of it. I know you approved false bills to pay debts." "Whose?" Ruth's control broke. She covered her face, and for several seconds only the small sound of her breathing disturbed the room. Ada watched without sympathy. Simon watched with terror. At last Ruth lowered the handkerchief. "My husband left debts when he died. Jonathan never knew the full amount." "You were a widow 12 years ago?" Belle asked. "Yes." "How much?" "Nearly $20,000. The first hidden series totaled $19,230. She nodded. "Moneylenders held notes bearing my name. Some also carried Jonathan's signature." "Forged?" Ruth looked towards Simon. "He helped me imitate it." Simon sprang up. "Again, that is a lie." Rowan pushed him back. Into the chair, Ruth continued. "At first I believed I could repay everything from my allowance. I could not. Martin Pike knew men who would buy the notes quietly. So Jonathan paid Pike $5,000. "No, I did." "Through the household accounts?" "The first payment, yes." "Why was Charles Wells accused?" Ruth's tears returned. "He found the false roof voucher." Ada's face became rigid. Ruth looked at her. "Charles came to me before he went to Jonathan. He said he would give me one night to confess." "You took his proof?" Ada said, "Yes, and in the morning Jonathan called him a thief." "I did not." "No, that would happen. You put the missing money in his cash box." Ruth shook her head violently. "No." "Who did?" "I don't know." Ada stepped toward her. "You knew enough to remain silent." Ruth's voice broke. "I was afraid Jonathan would send me away. I had nowhere to go. Charles had nowhere after you ruined him." Rowan moved between them. Belle asked, "Did Simon place the money in Charles's box?" Ruth looked at the clerk. Simon's mouth tightened. "I did nothing," Ruth said. "He told me he would protect me." Simon turned on her. "You approved every voucher because you prepared them. You needed the money, and you needed my signature." Belle raised a hand. "That is the point at which partners begin remembering separately." Silence returned. He touched the first heat mark. The first series of false payments concealed Ruth's debts. What did the second series conceal? Ruth closed her eyes. "My son's debts." Owen stared. "I have no son." Ruth opened her eyes. "No, I do." Owen looked from her to Ada, then back. "What are you saying?" Ruth's voice became barely audible. "Charles Wells was my son's father." Ada went still. Even Rowan forgot to look official. Belle did not move. "Your son's name?" Ruth looked toward the floor. "Simon." Simon Trent's face emptied. Owen said, "That is impossible." Ruth shook her head. "Simon was born before I married. Jonathan arranged for him to be raised elsewhere. Years later, after my husband died, Jonathan brought him into the business as a clerk." Ada stared at Simon. "Charles knew?" "Yes." "Was he Simon's father?" "No." Charles discovered the records. He threatened to tell Jonathan that Simon had begun using the household accounts. Simon stood for a third time, and this time Rowan let him. "That is false." Ruth looked at him with exhausted grief. "Simon, stop. You are trying to save yourself." "I saved you for 12 years, Belle said. "The second series began 18 months ago, after Simon had access to Jonathan's accounts." Ruth nodded. "He owed money from speculation. He said exposure would destroy both of us. I approved the invoices." Simon's hands had stopped, shaking. "I prepared what she ordered." Ruth looked at him. "You told me Jonathan would never compare the totals. He did not until last month. And when he did, He said the matching sums were deliberate. He knew someone had repeated the old method. Bell asked. Did Jonathan know Simon was your son? Yes. Did he know Simon prepared the recent false accounts? Not until yesterday. What happened then? Ruth twisted the handkerchief. Jonathan summoned me before dinner. He showed me the 3 marks he had recovered. He said the rest of the transfer sheet named Simon. Simon spoke sharply. There was no name. Ruth looked at him. You told me you removed it. Rowan turned. When? Simon's face hardened. I said no such thing, Bell said. You knew the transfer had been lifted. I inferred it. You also knew most of the writing had been scraped away. I heard you say so. Not before this. Morning? Simon's eyes shifted toward the account book. Bell continued. Jonathan promised Ruth help if she confessed before morning. Ruth nodded quickly. He said he would repay the debts, protect Simon from public scandal, and make restitution to Ada. He said Simon must resign and return what he had taken. Did you agree? Yes. Did Simon? I went to him after dinner. What did he say? That Jonathan was lying. That once I confessed, he would expose us both. Simon's voice was cold. She was hysterical. Ruth faced him. You said the only proof was on the transferred sheet. You said if it disappeared, Jonathan would have suspicion, but no case. Owen asked, Did you kill him? No. The answer came from both Ruth and Simon. Bell looked at Ruth. Where were you between 10 and 11? In my room until I left for the concert. You returned at 11:15. Yes. Jonathan was alive when you left? At 8:40, yes. Did you take the duplicate drawer key? No. Did you substitute the dark ribbon? No. Did you remove the transfer sheet? No. Bell turned to Simon. Where were you? In the rear office. Until 10:45. Witness? No. Did you enter Jonathan's office? No. Did you prepare the false roof, coal, and charity entries? Simon looked at Ruth. At her direction. Bell said, The writing survived because Jonathan used heat and reagent to recover pressure and chemical traces. Most of it was scraped, but 3 entries remained. All 3 bear Ruth's approval. That makes her guilty of fraud. Ruth bowed her head. It does not make her guilty of murder. Bell continued. Rowan frowned. She had motive to silence Hale. She also had his promise of help. Promises can be withdrawn. True, but the killer removed the final proof while leaving enough fragments to condemn. Ruth looked up. Bell pointed at the page. Why? Scrape most of the writing but leave 3 approved entries. To hide Simon's name, I said. Yes. The surviving marks push suspicion toward Ruth. The missing portion protects the person who prepared and benefited from the second account. Simon's face remained still. Owen said, Then Simon killed him. Bell shook his head. Not proved. His name was removed. According to Ruth. He lied about the ribbon. Yes, he concealed the duplicate. Key. Yes. What else do you need? The act. Bell held the page toward the lamp again. A 4th mark appeared near the lower corner. So faint I thought at first it was a stain. It was not an amount, it was a time. 30. Beside it, only 2 letters survived, St. Rowan. Stepped toward Simon. Simon backed away. Bell lowered the book. Jonathan expected Simon Trent at 10:30. Simon said nothing. That is when Arthur Bell waited outside. The locked house, I said. Bell nodded. Jonathan summoned 2 men for the same hour. Bell to receive the proof. Simon to answer it, Ruth whispered. He never told me. Simon moved toward the door. Rowan blocked him. I have work to do. You will remain, Rowan said. Bell closed the account book carefully. The heat had not restored the whole accusation. It had done something more useful. It had separated guilt. Ruth Hale had approved false payments, hidden debts, protected Simon, and allowed Charles Wells to die under a stolen shame. She had lied for 12 years and confessed only when the page began to speak. But Jonathan had offered her a way out before morning. Someone else had reached him before morning. Came. The blank page now held a false roof, a false coal order, a false charity, and 1 true appointment. At 10:30, Simon Trent had been expected in Jonathan Hale's office. At 10:30, Jonathan Hale was still alive. Before 11, the final proof had been scraped away, and the man who found it was dead. Chapter 7. The clerk's careful lie. Simon Trent asked Inspector Rowan for permission to enter his office and returned 10 minutes later carrying a ledger no one had requested. That alone made it interesting. He placed it on the library table beside Jonathan Hale's original account book. The duplicate was bound in green cloth, clean at the corners, and labelled Private Household Accounts in Simon's precise hand. Ruth sat near the fire with her handkerchief clenched in one fist. Owen stood behind her chair. Ada Wells remained by the door, watching Simon with the patience of a woman who had waited 12 years for a lie to become tired. Simon opened the green ledger. "This contains the complete record of the recent payments," he said. "Mr. Hale instructed me to copy them when he began reviewing the accounts. Bell did not touch it." "When?" "Last week. Exact day. Monday." "Where did you prepare it?" "In my office." "Who saw you?" "No one." Rowan turned several pages. Each false roof repair, coal order, servant wage, and charity payment appeared in neat black ink. Beside every entry was Ruth Hale's approval mark. Simon said, "This proves Miss Hale authorized the withdrawals." Ruth looked at him. "You prepared those invoices at your direction. You brought them to me among dozens of household papers. You signed them because you told me Jonathan had approved them." Simon's expression remained careful. Signatures speak for themselves. Bell leaned over the duplicate without touching the paper. "They speak too clearly." Simon frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means this book was prepared for an audience." "It was prepared for Mr. Hale." "No, Jonathan already possessed the original records. He would not need a duplicate containing only Ruth's approvals and none of your preparation notes," Simon said. "So he wanted a clean copy." Jonathan Hale marked a blank page, warmed hidden writing, concealed a message beneath his drawer lining, and summoned a private investigator. Nothing about his method was clean. Rowan examined the first page. "The entries appear accurate. The figures may be," Bell said. "The book is not." "How can you know?" Bell pointed to the binding. "The thread is new. The cover has not been handled. Every entry was made with the same ink, though Simon claims they were copied over several days." "I used one bottle," Simon replied. Bell turned a page toward the lamp. "The ink has dried evenly. No page carries dust, fingerprints, or blotting marks. This was written in one sitting." Simon's face tightened. "I work neatly. So does a forger." Rowan said, "When was it made?" Bell picked up the book and examined the final page. "Before Jonathan died." Owen leaned forward. "How can you tell?" "The last entry is the false greenhouse repair that completed the matching total. Jonathan discovered that entry yesterday afternoon. Simon claims Jonathan ordered the duplicate last Monday. But the final payment was not approved until yesterday." Everyone looked at Simon. He said, "I added the final entry later. With the same ink, pressure and dry condition as the others." "Yes," Bell shook his head. "You copied the entire ledger after Ruth approved the last voucher, and before. Jonathan confronted you at 10:30. Simon's voice sharpened. "You cannot prove that. The purpose proves it. That is nonsense. No. The duplicate contains Ruth's false signatures arranged in order, without one mark showing who invented the servants, selected the false addresses, or prepared the vouchers. It was made to survive after the original evidence disappeared." Ruth whispered, "You expected Jonathan to accuse me." Simon turned. "He did accuse you. He promised to help me. He lied. You told me he would, because he would have ruined us." Bell said, "Not us, you." Simon faced him. Bell continued, "Ruth's confession exposed fraud, but Jonathan's recovered writing identified the person who designed both series of false payments. The duplicate was your insurance. If Jonathan died and the original evidence vanished, this clean book would direct the police toward Ruth." Rowan closed the green ledger. "Why did you wait until now to produce it?" Simon's answer came quickly. "I was afraid it would be misunderstood." Bell nodded. "That is the kind of sentence prepared with the book." Simon's control slipped. "You have accused everyone in this house." Pike fled. Ruth admitted theft. Owen lied about his movements. "I'd a concealed family history. Yet you choose me because I kept records." "No. I choose your lie because it is careful." Bell opened Jonathan's account book to page 63. The pale brown heat mark still showed the false roof repair. Coal order and charity payment. Near the bottom remained the faint time 10:30, and the letters St. Bell placed the page beneath the reading lamp. Jonathan did not use this book merely to preserve old accounts. Yesterday he used it as a trap. Simon laughed once. A blank page. A page you believed had been scraped clean. The laugh ended. Bell adjusted the lamp so its light crossed the paper from the side. Jonathan knew someone had removed the thin pasted layer, carrying Charles Wells's original proof. He also knew pressure and chemical traces remained beneath it. He warmed the page, recovered part of the old message, and understood that the same method could preserve a new one. Ruth stared at the book. You mean he wrote on it again? Not with ordinary ink. Bell took a small brown bottle from his pocket. We found this in the back of Jonathan's stationery cabinet. It contains a heat-reading solution used by importers to mark valuable paper without visible ink. Jonathan wrote the thief's name across the blank page, covered it with a removable sheet and summoned Simon Trent. Simon said, "There was no name." Bell looked at him. "You have said that twice, because there was none. How could you know unless you saw the page after Jonathan prepared it?" Simon's mouth opened, then closed. Rowan moved closer. Bell warmed the lower half carefully. At first, nothing appeared beyond the damaged entries. Then thin brown impressions began rising between them. Most of the letters had been scraped from the surface, but the pressure of the pen had bitten into the fibers beneath. A vertical stroke appeared, then a curve, then several broken capitals. IMON. Ruth made a small sound. Simon stepped backward. Bell continued warming the page. Beneath the first name, another line emerged more faintly. Trent prepared both accounts. The final words were damaged, but one more fragment survived near the edge. Meet 10:30. Bell has copy. Simon's face had gone grey. Rowan said, "Jonathan named you." "No, the page is in his handwriting." "No, Bell wrote it." Bell looked almost disappointed. "You watched the page for several minutes." The writing emerged from within the fibers. "I could not have placed it there after the laboratory sealed the book. You had the ribbon. You handled the evidence. The ribbon did not write your name." Simon turned toward Ruth. "You approved the payments." She looked at him with tears on her face. "I confessed. You ruined me." "No," Bell said. "Jonathan offered restitution, resignation, and private settlement. Murder ruined you." Simon moved toward the library door. One blocked him. "I am not under arrest. Not yet." Simon glanced toward the windows. Owen stepped into his path. "You used my coat." Simon's eyes shifted. Bell said, "You took Owen's brown overcoat from the cloakroom, entered the rear office where Ada saw only your outline, and removed your duplicate drawer key from the bundle. You cut the dark ribbon to conceal that a key was missing." Simon said nothing. "You entered Jonathan's office at 10:30. He showed you the recovered name and the copy he intended to give me. You argued. No. You struck him with the bronze ship. No. You removed the visible transfer sheet and scraped the new writing from the blank page. You replaced Jonathan's pale ribbon with the darker strip from your keys, so the page remained marked, while the original ribbon, stained with reagent, disappeared." Simon's lips tightened. "Where is your proof of the blow?" "Not yet presented." "Then this is theatre." Bell nodded toward the green duplicate. "No, that was theatre. A clean ledger waiting to condemn Ruth, prepared before Jonathan died." Ada stepped away from the door. "You placed the money in Charles's box too." Simon turned on her. "I was a child." "You were 28, Ruth." Closed her eyes. Ada continued, "You were already working under another name in Pike's office. Charles found the payment scheme and recognized you." Simon's face changed. Bell looked at Ada. "You knew?" "Not until Ruth spoke yesterday. Charles once told me the clerk helping Pike had the same birthmark as Miss Ruth's hidden son." Simon's hand moved toward his collar. Bell said, "The first fraud was not only Ruth's debt. Simon helped Pike disguise the payments. Charles discovered him. Ruth stole the proof and Simon planted the missing cash." Ruth whispered, "I did not know that." Simon looked at her. "You knew enough." Rowan reached for him. Simon struck the lamp from the table. The room went dark, except for the fire. He lunged toward the door, but Owen caught his shoulder. They hit the wall together. Rowan and I reached them before Simon could free himself. When the lights were restored, Simon sat in a chair with Rowan's handcuffs around his wrists. The account book remained open. Across the page, pale and broken but readable, Jonathan Hale's accusation had survived. Simon had removed the pasted layer. He had scraped the visible ink. He had prepared a duplicate ledger to bury Ruth beneath her own signatures. What he had missed was the pressure of Jonathan's pen beneath the surface. Bell closed the green duplicate and placed it aside. A careful lie, he said, is merely a confession arranged in advance. Simon stared at the blank page that was no longer blank. The clerk had spent years balancing false accounts. Jonathan Hale had defeated him with the one thing Simon never expected: to carry a name, empty paper. Chapter 8. The dead man's test. Jonathan Hale had not spent his final hour waiting for murder. He had spent it conducting an examination. Arthur Bell established that on the following morning, when Inspector Rowan assembled Ruth Hale, Owen Hale, Ada Wells, Martin Pike, and Simon Trent in the library at Greyford House, Simon's wrists were no longer handcuffed, but an officer stood behind his chair, which reduced the practical difference. The original account book lay beneath the reading lamp. Beside it rested the duplicate ledger Simon had prepared to condemn Ruth. Bell remained standing. Jonathan summoned each of you separately on the evening he died, he said. You all concealed it because each conversation concerned a secret you feared. Owen frowned. He never summoned me. He sent Ada to your room at 8:20, Ada nodded. Mr. Hale asked Mr. Owen to come to the office. Owen looked at her. You said he wanted to discuss my debts. That is what you told me afterward. Bell said, what Jonathan actually showed you was the ribboned page. Owen's face tightened. He held it near the fire and said one name would appear when the paper grew warm. What did you do? I laughed. You then asked whether the name could be removed. I was curious. You were frightened. My debts had nothing to do with those accounts, but you knew Jonathan might expose your false statement concerning the rear entrance. Owen sat back. Bell turned to Ruth. You entered. Next. Ruth's hands rested, motionless in her lap. My brother showed me the 3 false entries. He told you the page would reveal the thief. Yes, and you asked him to burn it. I had spent 12 years protecting Simon. Simon stared at the carpet. Bell faced Martin Pike, who had been found before dawn in a rented room near Pennsylvania Station. He looked grey, tired, and resentful. Jonathan summoned you at 9:30. Pike nodded. He showed me the blank page and said Heat would restore the payment instruction. Did you believe it? Yes. You feared the old $5,000 payment would make you appear to be Charles Wells's blackmailer. I accepted money to settle Ruth's notes. I did not kill Charles, and I did not kill Jonathan. You fled because of the false warning naming you. Yes, Bell looked at Ada. Jonathan called you in at 10. The housekeeper stood near the door. He showed me Charles's name rising from the page. What did he say? That by morning the family would know Charles had been innocent. Were you calm afterward? No. Ada's voice was steady, but her eyes were not. I went to the kitchen and cried. Bell finally turned to Simon. You entered at 10:30. Simon raised his head. We have covered this. No, we have covered the page, not the test. Rowan said, explain. Bell opened the account book. Jonathan had recovered enough of Charles Wells's hidden message to understand the first fraud. Then he discovered the later false payments, repeated the old total exactly. He knew the thief was someone familiar with the first scheme. The first thief was Ruth. Simon said the first debtor was Ruth. The careful mind behind the vouchers was yours, Motan. I was not employed here 12 years ago. You were employed by Martin Pike under another name. Pike looked at Simon with open disgust. You prepared the settlement papers, he said. I knew I had seen you before. Simon said nothing. Bell continued. Jonathan needed more than suspicion. He therefore summoned each person who might fear the blank page and told the same lie. Owen leaned forward. Lie? The page would not reveal the thief merely by warming it. Jonathan had already recovered what survived. The new accusation he wrote in heat-reading ink was bait. Ruth looked at the account book. He wanted someone to destroy it. Yes. Rowan frowned. That risks losing the evidence. Not if the destruction becomes evidence. Bell pointed to the scraped surface. Jonathan expected the guilty person to remove the pasted layer, scrape the visible writing, steal the transfer sheet and substitute the ribbon. Each innocent person feared what the page might reveal. Only the guilty person believed the danger could be ended by touching it. I said, "Jonathan turned the account book into a trap." Bell nodded. He watched their reactions. Owen asked whether the writing could be removed. Ruth begged him to burn it. Pike argued about the meaning of the payment. Ada wept over Charles. Simon did none of those things. Simon gave a thin smile. "You call calmness guilt? Not by itself." "Then you have nothing." Bell looked at him. After leaving the office, each of the others behaved as a frightened person behaves. Owen telephoned a creditor. Ruth went to her room and wrote a confession she later destroyed. Pike tried to borrow money and considered leaving town. Ada remained in the kitchen with the servants, and I returned to work. "Yes," calmly, "that is my habit. Because you believed you had already won." Simon's smile vanished. Bell continued. "You had prepared the green duplicate before entering Jonathan's office. You expected suspicion to fall upon Ruth. When Jonathan showed you the ribboned page, you did not panic because you believed the only dangerous evidence was the removable top sheet. That is invention. No, it is sequence." Bell lifted the duplicate. "Ledger, you wrote this before the murder. You supplied Ruth's approvals and omitted your own notes. You took Owen's coat, stole the duplicate drawer key, met Jonathan at 10:30, and learned that he had named you beneath the removable layer." Simon's voice sharpened. "You cannot prove what I believed, Jonathan." "Did." Bell took out a folded sheet copied from the figures in the account book. The first false series totaled $19,230. The second totaled the same. Jonathan arranged the final greenhouse payment so the two totals matched exactly. Ruth stared. "He approved the last payment. He allowed it to pass." Simon's eyes moved toward the paper. Bell saw it. The final payment was not merely another theft. It completed a numerical signature. Rowan asked, "Whose?" Bell wrote the totals on a pad, 230. Then beneath them, he separated the figures according to the old household filing code, referred to Simon's original employee number in Pike's office, referred to the date. Simon first entered Jonathan's service, marked an unreceipted payment. Simon laughed harshly. "That is absurd." "Taken alone, yes." Jonathan did not rely on it alone. He wrote beside the second total, "Same hand, same sum, same thief." Bell turned the account book to page 64. Under the charitable subscriptions almost hidden among legitimate figures, Jonathan had entered three amounts, 2,000, 75,000, 2,030. Together, they made 19,230. Three false-looking payments. Rowan asked. "No, three genuine transfers Jonathan ordered yesterday morning. Their recipients were Ada Wells, a trust for Charles Wells's name, and a reserve to repay Ruth's creditors." Ada's lips parted. Bell said, "Jonathan balanced the stolen total with restitution. He knew Simon would examine the figures after destroying the page. I understood, and Simon did." Bell nodded. Only the thief would total those unrelated entries and recognize the repeated sum. Jonathan left a note in his blotter. "He will check the balance." Rowan faced Simon. "Did you?" Simon did not answer. Bell continued. After Jonathan died, Simon entered the office, destroyed the visible accusation, and opened the book to see whether the totals still betrayed him. His fingerprints were found not only on the account book cover, where they belonged, but beside those three fresh entries on page 64. Simon's face changed. Rowan said, "The laboratory report mentioned those prints this morning." Bell nodded. Simon had claimed he never examined the book after 6. Yet his prints lie on ink written after that hour. Simon rose. The officer behind him placed a hand on his shoulder. Simon sat again. Bell closed the account book. Jonathan's test did not depend on the page surviving. It depended upon the thief believing the page was the only danger. Ruth whispered. "He knew Simon would destroy it." "Yes." "And the totals. They were the second clue." Pike looked toward. "Simon, you framed me before you killed him." Simon's control finally cracked. "You accepted the money to settle Ruth's debts. You helped hide everything. I did not strike." "Jonathan." Simon turned on Ruth. "You approved the invoices." Ruth met his gaze through tears. "I confessed," Ada said quietly. "And Charles never had the chance." The library fell silent. Bell placed the blue ribbon across the closed account book. Jonathan Hale summoned 5 people and showed each the same blank page. Four feared what it might reveal. One believed he knew how to silence it. Rowan signaled the officer. Simon was taken to his feet. As he passed the table, he looked once at the account totals. It was not fear in his face now. It was hatred for arithmetic. Bell watched him go. The page accused him, I said. No, Bell replied. His answer to it did. Jonathan Hale had expected the visible clue to be destroyed, so he left another where a careful clerk could not resist looking. In the balance. Chapter 9. The numbers beneath the silence, Arthur. Bell gathered the household in Jonathan Hale's library at 8 that evening and placed 3 objects. On the long table, the original account book Simon, Trent's green duplicate, and a black leather account case taken from Simon's office after Inspector Rowan obtained a warrant. Simon sat between 2 officers. Ruth occupied the chair nearest the fire, pale and exhausted. Owen stood behind her. Martin Pike sat across from Ada Wells, who had refused a chair. Inspector Rowan remained beside the door, while I took a position near the table where I could see every face without improving any of them. Bell opened Jonathan's book to the heated page. The murderer believed this page had been silenced, he said. It had not. Simon's mouth tightened. Bell read the surviving entries aloud. False roof repair, $1,400. False coal order, $960. False charity payment, $600. He turned to later pages and continued through the disguised repairs. Invented deliveries, wages paid to servants who had never existed, and storage fees charged to buildings that had never stored anything. Ruth covered her eyes. Bell did not hurry. When every false payment had been read, he wrote the amounts in 2 columns. The first represented the old scheme that began 12 years earlier. The second represented the newer thefts prepared through Ruth's household. Approvals, the totals were identical. $19,230. Bell faced Simon. Repeated sum is not coincidence. When the same clerk prepared both accounts, Simon replied, Ruth approved the payments. Some. All. No. Bell opened the green duplicate. This book says she did. That is why you created it. I copied the vouchers. You copied only those bearing Ruth's marks. You omitted the invoices carrying Jonathan's forged initials, the drafts prepared under false servant names, and the delivery orders written in your hand. Simon looked toward Rowan. This is accusation, not proof. Rowan put the black leather case on the table. Bell opened it. The case appeared empty when it was taken from your office. Mr. Goodwin disagreed. I had disagreed because the bottom felt too stiff. I had removed the inner frame and found a second lining glued. Beneath the first, Bell lifted a folded bank draft from an evidence envelope. It was payable to Simon Trent. The amount was $19,230. No one spoke. Bell laid it beside the 2 totals. Your private draft matches the amount stolen through the household accounts. Simon stared at it. That money is mine. From what source? Investments. Name one. I do not discuss my finances. Your bank will. Simon's eyes shifted toward Ruth. She whispered, You told me the money had gone to creditors. Some did. How much? He did not answer. Bell said, Almost none. Ruth's old debts gave you the method. Her fear gave you protection. Her signatures gave you a respectable name beneath which to hide theft. Ruth looked at Simon. I approved papers because you said they were necessary to prevent scandal. They were. For whom? Simon's silence answered. Bell continued. 12 years ago, Ruth needed money to conceal debts left by her husband. You helped Martin Pike prepare settlements and learned how false repairs and household expenses could move cash without immediate scrutiny. Pike said, I never authorized theft. No, Bell replied. You accepted payment for arranging the settlements and agreed to remain silent. Charles Wells discovered the false voucher. Ruth took his proof. Simon then placed missing cash where Jonathan would find it among Charles's possessions. Ada's hands closed. Simon turned toward her. You cannot prove that. Charles's old statement survived in the account book. It named the clerk working with Pike. The visible layer was removed, but the pressure marks remained. Ada said, Charles died believing no one would ever clear him. Bell looked at her. Jonathan intended to clear him publicly. Morning after his own death. Ruth began to cry. Silently, Bell returned his attention to Simon. When you entered Jonathan's service under your real name, he did not connect you with Pike's former clerk. Ruth protected that history because you were her son. For years you served him faithfully enough to gain complete access to his accounts. I was faithful. Until 18 months ago, Simon's face hardened. Bell said, "You began stealing under Ruth's name. You forged some approvals and buried others among papers she signed without reading. You repeated the exact old total because you believed Jonathan would never compare a recent household account with a scandal 12 years buried." Owen said, "Why repeat the amount?" Bell answered without looking at him, "Because Simon considered it the sum the family owed him." Simon's head came up. There it was. Bell said, "Your bank draft proves it. You did not take random amounts. You stopped when the total reached $19,230. Simon's voice was low. "My mother spent that much protecting the Hale name while I was hidden like something." "Shameful." Ruth stared at him. "I protected you. You denied me. I gave you work, security, and a place near me. As a clerk," Bell said. "So you collected a private inheritance?" Simon laughed bitterly. "Jonathan would have left Owen everything," Owen said. "That is not my fault." "No," Simon replied. "It is merely your profession." Rowan stepped forward. "You admit the theft." Simon looked at the bank draft. "I admit nothing." Bell closed the green ledger. "You planned more than theft. When Jonathan discovered the repeated total, you prepared this duplicate before he died. It collected Ruth's approvals in one clean volume. Once she confessed her hidden debts, the book would convert shame into apparent guilt." Ruth's voice shook. "You expected me to be arrested. I expected Jonathan to destroy us both. He promised to help. He promised to control the scandal." Bell said, "At 10:30, Jonathan showed you the blank page. He told you it carried the thief's name in heat-reading ink. You struck him, removed the transferred sheet, scraped the visible writing, and replaced his pale ribbon with the darker strip cut from your keys." Simon's jaw tightened. "You still have no witness to the blow." "No. The murder was committed in privacy. Your preparation was not." Bell pointed toward the duplicate ledger and bank draft. "You created evidence against Ruth before Jonathan died. You hid the stolen total in your case before the last payment had been publicly questioned. You lied about the duplicate key, the ribbon, and your examination of the account book. You warned Pike that the evidence named him, then used his flight to strengthen the accusation." Pike said, "You intended all of us to carry a part of it." "Exactly," Bell replied. "Ruth would supply motive. Pike would supply the secret payment and flight. Owen's coat would supply confusion at the rear office. Ada's grief would keep attention fixed on Charles. Simon would remain the careful clerk who merely recorded what others ordered." Simon looked at Bell with open hatred. "You think a blank page proves murder?" "No." Bell placed one finger on page 63. The page did not display the crime. "It created a test." He indicated the scraped fibers near the spine. "Jonathan expected the guilty person to destroy what appeared here. Every innocent person feared what the page might reveal. Only the thief believed he could survive by erasing it," I said. "And in trying to erase it, he exposed everything else." Bell nodded. "The missing key, the substituted ribbon, the duplicate ledger, the false warning to Pike, the fresh fingerprints on the final account totals, the bank draft hidden inside the case." Rowan faced Simon. "The numbers beneath the silence belong to you." Simon looked at Ruth. For a moment he appeared less like a careful clerk and more like the abandoned son he had carried inside him for years. Then the moment passed. "You should have told him," he said. Ruth whispered. "I was ashamed, and I paid for it." "No," Bell said. "Charles Wells paid first. Jonathan Hale paid last." Rowan signaled the officers. Simon rose without resistance. As they led him toward the door, he stopped beside the account book. "I scraped the name away." Bell met his eyes. "You scraped the surface." Simon looked down at the bank draft, the matching totals, and the green ledger he had prepared too carefully. Then he left. Ada remained standing near the fire. "Will Charles's name be cleared?" Rowan answered, "Yes." Ruth bowed her head. Owen said nothing. Bell closed the original account book and laid the blue ribbon across its cover. Jonathan Hale's blank page had never been ordinary empty paper. It had preserved an old accusation, carried a new one. Hand offered the murderer a chance to betray himself. The criminal had erased the words. He had not erased the numbers, and numbers, unlike respectable people, had no talent for keeping silent. Chapter 10. The Ribbon's Final Mark Arthur Bell waited until Simon Trent had been returned to the library under guard before explaining why the bronze ship had never been the murder weapon. Inspector Rowan stood beside the fireplace. Ruth Hale sat with Ada Wells near her. Owen remained at the window while Martin Pike occupied the chair farthest from Simon. The original account book lay open on the table, its blue ribbon resting across the blank page. Bell placed the bronze ship beside it. The paperweight carried Jonathan's fingerprints. Owen's fingerprints and several smears, he said. It also carried no blood in the narrow grooves beneath its base. Rowan frowned. The laboratory found blood on one edge. Transferred blood. It touched Jonathan after he had fallen. Simon's face remained expressionless. Bell opened an evidence envelope and removed a heavy brass-edged desk ruler. It was 18 inches long, thick at one end and stained dark near the metal cap. This was found behind the filing cabinet in Simon's office. Simon said, "It belonged to Jonathan." "No, Jonathan's initials are absent. Yours are scratched beneath the handle." Bell turned it over. "ST. "The ruler fits the wound," Rowan said. "Yes." The medical examiner confirmed that the narrow metal edge produced the fracture. The bronze ship was placed beside the body afterward because Owen's prints were already on it. Owen stared at Simon. "You tried to frame me." Simon gave him a cold look. "You required little assistance," Bell continued. At 10:30, Jonathan summoned Simon to the office and showed him the ribboned page. He explained that the blank surface contained the true thief's name in heat-reading ink. He also showed him the matching totals and said Arthur Bell would arrive within minutes. "I never entered that room," Simon said. "Your fingerprints were found on the freshly written entries after 6, though you claimed you had put the book away and never touched it again. I handled it earlier, not after the ink dried." Bell lifted the ruler. "You argued." Jonathan turned toward the desk telephone. "You took this from the side table and struck him behind the head." Ruth closed her eyes. Bell said, "The first blow brought him to his knees. The second killed him." Simon's jaw tightened. "You have no witness. No, you arranged privacy carefully, but you arranged everything afterward too carefully." Bell placed the ruler beside the green duplicate ledger. "You opened Jonathan's center drawer with the missing duplicate key. You removed the transfer sheet, carrying the recovered writing. You scraped the visible heat-reading message from page 63, believing the blankness had been restored." Simon said nothing. "You then planted the duplicate ledger you had prepared before the murder. It displayed Ruth's approvals, omitted your preparation notes, and converted her confession into apparent guilt." Ruth looked at him. "You intended me to carry all of it?" Simon's voice was flat. "You had carried it for years." Bell said, "That was your justification, not your defense." He picked up the blue ribbon. Jonathan's original marker was pale blue and carried traces of the reagent used on the page. "You removed it because it could connect the writing process to the account book. Then you cut this darker ribbon from your office keys and tied it back in the same place." Rowan asked, "Why replace it at all?" "Because Simon believed removing the ribbon would attract attention." Bell had been summoned to inspect the marked page. If the ribbon vanished, everyone would know the account book had been altered. Simon's eyes moved to the silk strip. Bell continued, "So he left the page marked, certain that an empty sheet would confuse us. He did not understand that keeping the ribbon was worse." "Why?" Owen asked. "Because the ribbon told us the blankness mattered. Without it, page 63 might have passed as an unused leaf. With it, the page became a deliberate statement." I said, "He preserved the question after destroying the answer." Bell nodded. "And every effort to control that question exposed another part of the crime." He turned toward Ruth. "Your hidden debts explained. Why you begged Jonathan to burn the recovered writing. You approved false payments to protect Simon and concealed Charles Wells's proof 12 years ago. You were guilty of fraud, cowardice, and silence." Ruth's voice was faint. "But not murder." "No." Bell faced Owen. "Your anger and debts explained your lies. You entered by the rear door, feared that Jonathan intended to change his will. and concealed your movements because you had gone to the office corridor hoping to ask for money. Owen looked away. You wore no disguise and killed no one, Bell said. Simon borrowed your coat because Ada would recognize its outline and remember you instead of him. Then Bell looked at Martin Pike. Your loan request explained why you were near the corridor. Jonathan had summoned you to discuss the old payment and your present debts. When you received a false warning that the account book named you as Charles Wells's blackmailer, you ran. Pike's mouth tightened. I should have stayed. Yes, flight made you useful to Simon. Ada Wells spoke quietly. And Charles? Bell turned toward her. His name will be cleared. Jonathan's recovered message, the surviving pressure marks, and Ruth's confession established that he discovered the fraud and was falsely accused. Ada looked at the account book. He waited 12 years for that. No, Ruth said through tears. He died waiting. No one answered her. Rowan approached Simon. You used the ruler, planted the paperweight, scraped the page, substituted the ribbon, forged the duplicate ledger and sent Pike the warning. Simon looked at Bell. You have arranged a neat story. Bell's expression did not change. You arranged it. I only removed the false parts. Rowan placed the handcuffs on Simon's wrists. For the first time, Simon's control deserted him. He looked at Ruth. You let Jonathan hide me. You let him make me a clerk in the house where Owen would inherit everything. Ruth stood. I tried to keep you safe. You kept me ashamed. And so you stole. I took what the family owed. You killed the man who protected you. Simon's face hardened again. He protected the Hale name. Bell said, Jonathan's motives were imperfect. Your blow was not. The officers moved Simon toward the door. He stopped beside the table and stared at the blank page. I removed the name. Bell looked at him steadily. You removed the ink. You left the pressure. You removed the transfer sheet. You left the rough edge. You removed Jonathan's ribbon. You tied another in its place. You prepared a duplicate to accuse Ruth and hid a bank draft matching the stolen total. Simon's eyes lowered to the ribbon. Bell said, A criminal may destroy evidence. He cannot destroy the reason he touched it. Simon was taken out. The library remained silent after the door closed. Rowan collected the ruler, duplicate ledger, bank draft, and account book. Ruth signed a statement, admitting the false approvals and the concealment of Charles Wells's proof. Pike agreed to explain the old payment publicly. Owen stopped objecting long enough to understand that his uncle's will would now be the least complicated document in the house. Ada stood near the table until Rowan lifted the account. Book, may I see the page once more? She asked. He allowed it. She touched no paper. She merely looked at the faint brown traces, the damaged surface, and the name Wells rising near the spine. Then she nodded. That is enough. Bell and I left Greyford House shortly before midnight. On the pavement, I asked him why Jonathan had trusted an invisible message when he could have written Simon's name openly. He did not trust it, Bell said. He used it as bait, for Simon, for everyone. Jonathan wanted to know who feared the old truth, who feared the new theft, and who believed destruction would save him. And Simon answered by killing him. Yes, we looked back at the dark windows of the respectable house. The case had begun with a blue ribbon marking an empty page. Ruth saw shame there. Owen saw inheritance. Pike saw an old payment. Ada saw her husband's stolen name. Simon saw the one accusation he could not allow to survive. He scraped the page, removed the visible writing, planted another ledger, and tied the ribbon back in place because he believed emptiness was harmless. That was his final mistake. In a guilty house, ink can be denied, signatures can be forged, and accounts can be balanced by lies, but blank paper asks why it was left blank. Sometimes that question speaks louder than anything ever written upon it.